Hey there. Let's get straight to the heart of it. What if I told you that much of what you've been taught about the serpent in Genesis is incomplete? The narrative you've always heard, the one repeated in Sunday school or Bible study, might be missing a crucial layer of meaning. In the original Hebrew, the word used for serpent is nahas. Here's where things get really interesting. While most translations simplify nahas as snake or serpent, the term carries deeper layers of meaning. It's not just a static noun. It's linked to actions like whispering or enchanting concepts often tied to divination and the pursuit of hidden knowledge. The word itself hints at a seeker or bearer of esoteric wisdom. If this sounds like more than just a snake to you, you're absolutely right. In ancient Near Eastern cultures, snakes weren't just creepy creatures crawling on the ground. They were powerful symbols. In Mesopotamian mythology, the god Enki, often depicted with serpentine imagery, was celebrated as a source of wisdom and insight. Meanwhile, Egyptian culture revered snakes as sacred beings. The uraeus, that cobra adorning Pharaoh's crown, symbolized divine authority and protection. In Canaanite traditions, serpents were associated with transformation and healing. Given this rich symbolism, does the serpent in Genesis really fit the role of an evil trickster? Or is it something far more complex? Was it leading Eve astray, or was it offering her and Adam a path to enlightenment, a chance to awaken to something greater? These aren't fringe ideas. Scholars and alternative interpretations have been exploring them for years. Yet, they rarely break into mainstream narratives, perhaps because they challenge the version of the story we've been told for centuries. Let's take a closer look at Genesis 3. The interaction between the serpent and Eve is striking. It doesn't manipulate her through force or deceit. Instead, it asks questions. It challenges the divine restriction with curiosity and reasoning. Did God really say? This isn't the voice of a liar. It's the voice of a challenger, perhaps even a teacher encouraging critical thought. And what about the fruit itself? While tradition paints it as an apple, the text only refers to it as the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The serpent's role isn't about luring Eve into evil. It's about directing her toward transformation. When Adam and Eve eat the fruit, the first thing they gain is knowledge. Their eyes are opened. They become self-aware, recognizing their vulnerability. Is that not a profound leap in human consciousness? So, is the serpent truly the villain in this story? Or does it play a pivotal role in humanity's awakening? And why has its role been vilified for so long? Could it have been theological convenience to later equate the serpent with Satan? After all, the original Hebrew text of Genesis never explicitly links the serpent to Satan. The connection emerged centuries later. If the serpent in Genesis represents more than just a literal snake, then we must ask ourselves an even deeper question. Why a serpent? Why did the writer of Genesis choose this particular symbol to embody such a critical moment in the story of humanity? To unravel this mystery, we need to delve into the rich and layered symbolism of serpents across ancient cultures. What we discover might fundamentally shift how we perceive this creature and its role in the narrative. Let's begin by understanding that serpents were never just animals in ancient societies. They were symbols laden with meaning. Across various cultures, snakes represented dualities: wisdom and danger, life and death, healing and destruction. The serpent wasn't a random choice. It was a deliberate symbol, one that carried centuries of cultural significance. The question is, what did it symbolize in Genesis? Stick with me, because what we're about to uncover might just transform the way you think about this iconic figure. Let's begin with Egypt, where snakes were anything but symbols of evil. The cobra, or uraeus, wasn't just an ornament atop the pharaoh's crown. It was a powerful emblem of divine protection and authority. It symbolized the pharaoh's connection to the gods and their ability to ward off chaos and enemies. Beyond that, the snake represented order, immortality, and the cosmic balance of life. Now think about the serpent in Genesis, positioned at the heart of a story about cosmic order and disruption. Coincidence? Hardly. Moving to Mesopotamia, we find another layer of meaning. The god Enki, a central figure in Sumerian mythology, is often depicted with serpentine imagery and flowing waters. Enki wasn't just a god. He was a giver of wisdom, magic, and life itself. He shared knowledge with humanity, sometimes defying the will of other gods. Does this sound familiar? It's another clear connection between serpents and the pursuit of hidden truths. In Canaanite culture, which deeply influenced the biblical world, snakes held transformative power. They were symbols of healing and renewal. You've probably seen the image of a staff entwined with two serpents, the caduceus, a symbol still used in modern medicine. Snakes in this context weren't inherently good or bad. They were forces of change, capable of destruction or renewal, depending on how they were approached. Then there's Greece, where the parallels to Genesis are striking despite the differences in time and culture. In Greek myths, serpents often guarded sacred treasures or forbidden knowledge. Take the Garden of the Hesperides, for example, where a dragon serpent named Ladon guarded golden apples of immortality. A garden, forbidden fruit, a serpent. It's not hard to see how such myths might share a thematic resonance with the Genesis story. What ties all of this together is the serpent's dual symbolism. Across cultures, snakes were rarely seen as one-dimensional. They embodied wisdom and danger, life and death, creation and destruction. They were boundary crossers, capable of moving between realms, the earthly and the divine, the sacred and the profane. One thing is clear: snakes were never just animals in these stories. They were deeply symbolic, chosen with intention to carry profound meanings. They acted as intermediaries, messengers, and carriers of hidden truths. And the serpent in Genesis? It perfectly aligns with this archetype. This wasn't just a snake slithering into a garden. It was a symbol burdened with centuries of cultural and spiritual significance, layered meanings we're still unpacking today. The ancient Hebrew language is rich with nuance, often employing wordplay and layered meanings to convey profound ideas. The word nahas is no exception. It shares linguistic roots with terms that mean to shine or bright. Some scholars have even drawn connections between nahas and celestial imagery, suggesting the serpent may have been portrayed as a radiant, almost divine figure, not merely an earthly creature. Could the serpent in Genesis have been depicted as an otherworldly being, one that transcended the ordinary? Adding to this complexity is the word Aram, used to describe the serpent in Genesis. Commonly translated as crafty or cunning, this term has a neutral tone in Hebrew. It can also imply intelligence or shrewdness, depending on its context. So, was the serpent acting deceptively, or was it offering a clever challenge to the established order? The text doesn't give a definitive answer, leaving room for interpretation. Let's examine the serpent's actions in the story. It doesn't outright lie or manipulate. Instead, it poses a question. Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? This approach is strategic. It doesn't accuse or mislead, but invites Eve to reflect and reconsider. When Eve responds, the serpent reframes the situation. You will not surely die, for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Here's the fascinating part. The serpent's words align with what actually happens. Adam and Eve don't die immediately after eating the fruit. Instead, their eyes are opened, just as the serpent predicted. They gain knowledge, specifically the awareness of good and evil. So, was the serpent lying, or was it revealing a truth that had been obscured from humanity? This brings us to the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Why was it forbidden in the first place? The text doesn't describe the tree as evil, only that it bestows knowledge. That distinction is critical. The serpent wasn't tempting Eve with sin. It was offering her understanding. And isn't that what humanity has always sought, from ancient myths to the frontiers of modern science? The pursuit of knowledge is central to our identity. The serpent's actions echo a recurring theme in ancient Jewish literature figures who challenge divine boundaries for the benefit of humanity. Think of Prometheus bringing fire to mortals in Greek mythology, or Enki sharing forbidden wisdom in Mesopotamian tales. The serpent fits perfectly within this archetype. It's neither entirely good nor wholly evil, but a boundary crosser, someone or something that disrupts the established order to spark change. Now that we've explored the serpent's cultural and linguistic significance, let's delve into its narrative role in Genesis 3. The serpent is the catalyst for the pivotal moment in the story. Think about it. It's not God, Adam, or even Eve who propels the plot forward. It's the serpent. Its opening question, did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden, is calculated. It doesn't attack the divine directly, but instead invites Eve to question, to reflect, and to engage with the command. This approach is far from random, it's deliberate and transformative. Eve responds to the serpent by clarifying God's command. We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say, you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die. Let's pause for a moment, or you will die. That phrase is central to the story. The serpent directly challenges this warning, stating, you will not surely die. What happens next? Adam and Eve eat the fruit, and they don't immediately die. Instead, the text tells us their eyes are opened, and they realize they are naked. So, was the serpent lying, or was God's warning about death metaphorical? Perhaps it referred to spiritual death or a transformation in their relationship with the divine. Either way, the serpent's claim that their eyes would be opened proves true. They gain knowledge, specifically the knowledge of good and evil. But what does this knowledge signify? Scholars have wrestled with this question for centuries. Some interpret it as moral awareness, the ability to discern right from wrong. Others see it as autonomy, the power to make independent choices outside divine guidance. Whichever interpretation you lean toward, one thing is clear. This moment marks a seismic shift in human history, and the serpent is the catalyst. Here's the twist. God's response to Adam and Eve eating the fruit validates the serpent's words. In Genesis 3:22, God says, the man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. Think about that. God himself acknowledges that humanity has acquired divine-like knowledge. This leads to a compelling question. Was the serpent deceiving Eve, or was it exposing an uncomfortable truth that had been hidden from humanity? The serpent's influence doesn't stop with the fruit. It fundamentally alters the balance of the story. By persuading Eve to eat, the serpent disrupts the pristine order of Eden. But this act isn't merely about defying a rule, it's about challenging a structure where knowledge and power are concentrated in the divine. The serpent's actions push humanity into a new realm, one defined by choice, consequence, and accountability. This is more than a tale of temptation. It's a narrative about transformation. The serpent compels Adam and Eve to confront the complexities of freedom and the responsibilities that come with it, forever changing their place in the world. Let's not overlook the actions of Adam and Eve in this story. The narrative often casts Eve as the one who was deceived, but take a closer look. She doesn't act impulsively. Instead, she listens to the serpent, evaluates its words, and carefully observes the tree before making a decision. This is not a moment of blind temptation. but a deliberate, conscious choice. Adam, on the other hand, simply takes the fruit from Eve and eats without hesitation or inquiry. What does this contrast reveal about their respective roles in the story? It suggests a complexity often overlooked in traditional interpretations. Now consider the serpent's punishment. It isn't destroyed or annihilated, but is instead cursed to crawl on its belly and eat dust. Why this specific curse? Could it symbolize a way to neutralize the serpent's power without removing its role in the grand cosmic order? The text doesn't offer explicit reasons, but the punishment seems more about containment than eradication, hinting at the serpent's continued significance. This leads us into an intriguing area that's often overlooked: early Jewish and Christian interpretations of the serpent. Let's start with Jewish thought. In the centuries surrounding the writing of Genesis, Jewish scholars and rabbis engaged in rich debates about the serpent's true nature. The Talmud, for example, contains rabbinic discussions suggesting that the serpent might not have been a literal snake at all. Some rabbis speculated that it was a humanoid or divine-like creature, intelligent, articulate, and possibly with its own agenda. Far from being a mere tool of deception, the serpent was considered a meaningful character with motives and agency of its own. Then we have the Book of Enoch, an ancient Jewish text that, while not included in the Hebrew Bible, was widely read during the Second Temple period. Enoch delves into the interactions between supernatural beings and humanity, introducing figures like the Watchers who bring forbidden knowledge to mankind. While the serpent isn't explicitly mentioned, Enoch provides essential context, a fascination with entities that defy divine boundaries to reveal hidden truths. This theme of challenging limits echoes throughout ancient Jewish thought and ties directly to the serpent's role in Genesis. Shifting to early Christian interpretations, the serpent's identity underwent a dramatic transformation. By the time the New Testament was written, Revelation 12:9 explicitly connects the serpent to Satan, calling it that ancient serpent who is called the devil. This reinterpretation, however, is absent from Genesis itself. It's a later theological development that shaped Christian doctrine for centuries. But why was the serpent linked to Satan in the first place? To answer that, we need to explore the early Christian context. The followers of Jesus operated in a world deeply influenced by dualistic philosophies, particularly those of the Gnostics and Zoroastrians. These worldviews emphasized a cosmic struggle between good and evil, and the serpent naturally fit into this framework as a symbol of rebellion against divine order. By framing the serpent as Satan, early Christian leaders created a clear antagonist in the cosmic battle of their theology. However, this reinterpretation isn't grounded in the original Hebrew text of Genesis. And speaking of reinterpretations, Gnosticism takes the serpent's story to an entirely different level. In some Gnostic traditions, the serpent isn't a deceiver, it's a hero. That's right, rather than being a villain, the serpent is portrayed as a liberator, a figure revealing truths that empower humanity to escape ignorance. According to Gnostic texts, the god of Genesis, often referred to as the demiurge, is depicted as a tyrannical figure who sought to keep humanity in spiritual darkness. By encouraging Eve to eat the fruit, the serpent becomes a savior, bringing enlightenment to Adam and Eve. This perspective was, of course, labeled heretical by the early church, but it illustrates how the serpent's image was far from one-dimensional. Depending on the storyteller, the serpent could represent temptation, rebellion, or even liberation. And then there's the bronze serpent in the wilderness from the Book of Numbers. When Moses lifts a bronze serpent to heal the Israelites, it serves as a symbol of salvation. Think about that for a moment. The same creature vilified in Genesis is later used as a divine instrument of healing. This duality is no accident. It's a recurring motif in biblical literature and ancient Jewish thought. Serpents as both destroyers and saviors, villains and redeemers. The Bible didn't emerge in isolation. It was forged in a cultural melting pot where ideas flowed between civilizations, shaping and reshaping symbols like the serpent. The serpent in Genesis isn't merely a villain or a simple creature. It's a rich, multifaceted symbol carrying centuries of meaning from across the ancient world. Let's begin with Mesopotamia, often regarded as the cradle of civilization and a significant influence on early Israelite thought. One of the most compelling parallels to the Genesis story appears in the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of humanity's oldest literary works. In this epic, Gilgamesh embarks on a quest for immortality and discovers a plant that grants eternal life. However, before he can use it, a serpent steals the plant and sheds its skin, symbolizing renewal and immortality. Sound familiar? The similarities are striking. A serpent, a garden-like setting, a pursuit of divine knowledge or immortality. The echoes of this narrative in Genesis are hard to ignore. Now, let's turn to Canaanite religion, another cultural influence on the Bible. In Canaanite traditions, serpents symbolized fertility, healing, and divine power. A prominent figure in these myths is the god Baal, who, in some texts, battles a serpentine sea monster named Lotan. This imagery of serpents as potent, divine forces may have shaped how the ancient Israelites conceptualized their own stories. It's worth remembering that the Israelites lived among the Canaanites, absorbing elements of their culture, even as they sought to establish their distinct identity. Next, we look to Egypt, where serpents occupied a dual role as both protectors and threats. The goddess Wadjet, often depicted as a cobra, was revered as a symbol of royal authority and divine protection. On the other hand, the serpent Apophis embodied chaos and was perpetually in conflict with the sun god Ra. This duality, serpents as both guardians and destroyers, bears a striking resemblance to the complex role of the serpent in Genesis. Here too, the serpent isn't simply evil. It's a force of nature, dynamic and multifaceted. But there's more. Ancient Ugaritic texts from a city closely tied to early Israelite culture reference a divine figure named Kother, Wakassis, a craftsman god associated with serpentine imagery. In one myth, he forges weapons to defeat sea monsters, reinforcing the serpent's link to power, wisdom, and transformation. Could these narratives have influenced the depiction of the Genesis serpent? Absolutely. The cultural interplay between these civilizations and their shared symbolic language suggests that the serpent in Genesis carries far deeper meanings than what appears on the surface. Hittite mythology offers yet another layer to the serpent's story. In their ritual texts, serpents are often depicted as mediators between gods and humans. Far from being mere creatures, they were sacred beings tasked with maintaining cosmic balance. This notion aligns beautifully with the serpent's role in Genesis, not as a simple animal, but as a bridge between divine knowledge and human experience, acting as a catalyst for transformation. There's also the recurring motif of sacred gardens in ancient mythology. Consider the Sumerian tale of Dilmun or the Persian paradise gardens. These lush, divine spaces often feature serpents or supernatural beings as guardians. Genesis echoes this tradition, but flips the narrative. Instead of guarding the garden, the serpent disrupts it, introducing humanity to knowledge, self-awareness, and, ultimately, a new phase of existence. What if we reinterpret the serpent's role in Genesis altogether? To do so, we must consider the broader themes of the Bible. Genesis isn't just a story of creation. It's a story of boundaries: who sets them, who enforces them, and who has the audacity to challenge them. The serpent is a boundary crosser. It doesn't use brute force to disrupt Eden's harmony. It employs persuasion and logic. By questioning God's command, it forces Adam and Eve to confront a fundamental possibility: choice. Before this moment, They live in a state of naivete, obeying rules without understanding their purpose. The serpent's challenge changes everything, introducing the concept of autonomy. When Adam and Eve eat the fruit, they gain something extraordinary: moral discernment. This newfound understanding comes with heavy consequences: banishment, toil, mortality, but it also marks the beginning of humanity's intellectual and spiritual journey. Here's what's fascinating. The serpent's role parallels other biblical figures who question divine authority. Think of Jacob wrestling with the angel or Moses standing up to Pharaoh. These aren't stories of blind obedience. They are stories of struggle, questioning, and transformation. The serpent fits squarely within this tradition, a figure that disrupts the status quo to provoke growth and change. The serpent's actions align perfectly with a recurring theme in ancient narratives: the need to confront challenging questions about freedom, responsibility, and the inherent cost of knowledge. By introducing these complexities, the serpent forces humanity to step into a new realm of understanding. Now, let's take a closer look at the tree of knowledge itself. Why would a loving God place something so potent and seemingly dangerous at the heart of the garden, only to forbid its use? Was it meant to be a test, a trap, or perhaps an invitation? The serpent reframes the tree not as a danger, but as an opportunity, a means for humanity to become more like the divine, possessing the knowledge of good and evil. This perspective doesn't make the serpent inherently good, but it complicates the narrative. It reveals that Genesis isn't just a straightforward morality tale. It's a story steeped in risks, choices, and the growth that comes from them. Let's add another layer to this: the serpent's punishment. Genesis 3:14 describes it being cursed to crawl on its belly and eat dust. This isn't merely a physical transformation, but a symbolic act of degradation and containment. The serpent, once a figure capable of bridging the earthly and divine realms, is now bound to the ground, stripped of its intermediary power. Yet, it's significant that the serpent isn't destroyed outright. Could this suggest that its role as a provocateur was critical to the narrative's purpose? And what about humanity's punishment? Adam and Eve are expelled from Eden, but they aren't obliterated. Instead, they're sent into the world to live, to build, to face struggles, and to create. The serpent's intervention leads to the loss of Eden's innocence, but it also paves the way for the birth of human civilization as we know it. Without the serpent, there's no story, no humanity shaped by knowledge, choice, and resilience. As we conclude, I want to thank you for joining me on this journey. The story of the serpent in Genesis is far more nuanced and layered than many of us were taught, serving as a testament to the richness of ancient storytelling and its ability to provoke deep thought. If this video sparked new ideas or challenged your perspective, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more explorations like this. And of course, share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take on what we've uncovered. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.